Hi friends, today we're talking all things books. Now, if you follow me on my Instagram, you know I have been on a reading journey in 2024. I read 106 books last year. 2023, how many books did I read? 3 or 4, maybe. So reading has changed my life, like truly. It has helped my magical practice so much. It has helped my ADHD so much. And I really thought at the beginning of last year, I was never going to enjoy reading. I truly thought like reading is not for me. I've totally changed my mind on that. 2024 has been one of the most magical years of my life, specifically when it comes to my creativity, which I fully give credit to reading. I swear this has been the most creative time I have ever experienced. I think a lot of that is because I physically got out of my head and introduced to so many new ideas. And even though a lot of the books I read were about like murder, did not get ideas about that. But still, just branching out my experience helped with my creativity so much. Prior to 2024, I was reading a lot of nonfiction books, like self-help books. And I think what I've learned over this past year is what helps my magical practice and what helps my really just like self-awareness is not self-help books. I have come to a point where I'm really tired of being prescribed like another set of tools that will help me relax or become one with myself or become enlightened or whatever. And instead have really just enjoyed getting out of my head and reading smut. You know, it's sacral chakra healing. I've also found that I am way less stressed and I'm scrolling a lot less. My screen time is so much lower. I'm sleeping so much better because I have a setup where this is an aside, but it does help me read. I have a setup where I have like a device that holds my Kindle and I have a remote control so I can lay in my bed and just click, and just read until my eyes get heavy and then I put it down. Or sometimes I don't. I'll let you know which books kept me up at night. And finally, it's really helped my magical practice because reading has become a ritual for me. It's become this experiential thing that I really love. You know, I have it set up where I sit in my bed and I drink my tea and I read, or I wake up in the morning and I read and I drink my tea with my dogs. And it's just been this really beautiful ritual of self-care that I haven't let anything interrupt. It's like, no, I'm carving out this time and space for myself and it's been really fun. Today, I wanted to share with you all about my reading journey. I want to talk about how you can make reading a little bit more witchy because I know who you are and I know you're like me and you want to make it into your magical practice and that's great. We're going to work on that. I'm also going to talk with you about how I actually started reading with my ADHD because I also was someone who would read the same page like 18 times and then put a book down and never pick it up again. I have found some tips that have helped me overcome that. And then I am going to share my favorite books that I read this year. Yes, I'm going to share my top 3 from each of my top genres that I read. So let's get into it. Let's dive into how you can make reading a little bit more witchy so you actually want to do it. And this starts with stickers. Stickers, I know. So this is my Kindle, one of my Kindles. I have the Kindle Paperwhite is my favorite. I also bought the Color Soft when it came out. I don't love it, but they are sending me a replacement, so TBD on if I end up liking it. The Paperwhite is great. It's waterproof. It's the perfect size. This is my heart and soul, okay? So what I like to do is turn the back of my Kindle into an altar. So these stickers are actually not stuck down. I use museum glue, museum putty, you know, that sticky stuff that comes off to adhere them to these pieces of paper. So the piece of paper I pick based on color magic. So when I made this one, I really wanted motivation, wanted energy, hence the yellow. And then I essentially, as I would assign an intention to a sigil or a crystal on my altar, I assign an intention or feeling or a vibe to each of the stickers as I arrange them. So this is a really fun way to imbue your reading experience with magic. I also find that when I get into reading ruts, the first thing I do is I change out these stickers, I change out the background, and immediately the energy freshens up. Like immediately I'm motivated again to read. You can also do this with your Kindle charms. This was sent to me by one of my community members on Instagram. It is crystals. I think they're blue tiger's eye, but they're great for protection. So I use them for like protecting my energy, protecting my focus. So I will often spin them while I'm sitting here. I wish I could tell you where to buy crystal charms for your Kindle. I haven't seen them yet. So if you have a crystal shop and you're making these, let me know. But I also have done just like regular charms with like dangly stars or hearts or whatever, and you again can use color magic for that. So this is a really great one if you have a Kindle. If you have a regular book, you could do like what we did in middle school, or at least what I did in middle school. I don't know what the kids are doing these days, but we used to cover our books with a paper bag and then decorate them. And that's a really great way too, especially if you're reading a long series or a really long book and you're losing that motivation. Slap some sigils on there, slap your favorite quotes on there, slap some stickers on there, make it fun, turn it into your own portable altar that you sit with while you're reading. Next thing you can do is use reading as a manifestation technique. So a lot of us going into the new year have goals of who we want to be at the end of this year, or even next year, or in 5 years, 10 years. So who is that person you want to be? What habits do they have? And then find a book that is in first person POV, so I, me, my, and read about that person's life. So if you want to be someone who is super popular, right? Popular. Then read a book about a character that's really popular. See what trials and tribulations they go through. See how they handle it. Think about how would you handle it if you were in that situation. If you want to read about someone who starts a business, right? Like maybe you have aspirations of abundance or growing your finances this year. Reading about a character that is rich or well off can help put you in that mindset and help bring awareness to some of the things that they're going through. My final tip to make reading a little bit more witchy is to see it as a mindfulness practice. So there are some incredible stats about reading and stress relief. There are also some times where I've read books and I did not feel stress relief. We'll get to that later. But it's a really powerful tool to focus your attention. Mindfulness is all about paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it. So while you're reading, really feeling the book in your hands, breathing into your abdomen, really getting immersed in the story. I would argue that is meditation at its core. You can see that as an aspect of your spiritual practice in and of itself. Okay, so now that you see reading as more witchy, how do you actually do it when you have ADHD? I have 3 tips for you. 3 tips for you that have really helped my ADHD. The first is a Kindle. I know. I don't usually tell you to buy things. I usually tell you use what you have, but the Kindle changed the game for me. I have stats from the Storygraph app, which I love for tracking my reading and keeping track of books that I've read. And 80% of the books that I read last year were on my Kindle. The reason why I love it so much is because when you open up your book, at the bottom, you can see how many minutes are left in the chapter. And if you click on that, you can see how many minutes are left in the book. So 2 hours, 12 minutes, right? And then in the chapter, 1 minute left, right? This is obviously the table of contents, so. But as you read, it adjusts that time based on your reading speed. So I tend to have it off for the first chapter. And then I know, okay, as I'm reading, all right, I have 4 minutes left in this chapter. I can sit with this for 4 minutes. I can read with it for 4 minutes. And then chances are the next chapter comes and it's like 6 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I got this. I can read 6 minutes. Even if it's a longer chapter, I'm like, okay, it's 37 minutes. Great, I'm just gonna read 1 chapter. And I know how much time is left. And that really helps my ADHD stay focused. At the same time, what I have found is this is a really good gauge for when you should just stop reading a book. If you find every single chapter, you're like, okay, just 9 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, just 20 more minutes, and you are slugging through chapter after chapter after chapter, do your ADHD a favor and put that book down. Put it down. I have found with every book that I have enjoyed reading, after like a chapter or 2, I get the momentum and I don't even think about how long I've been reading. But if you're slogging through it, put it down. Next thing I recommend is books with short chapters. So I really like books that have chapters that are under like 20 minutes long. I love thrillers and I specifically love books by Frida McFadden. She is a really great thriller writer that if you like short chapters where they drop you right into the action, she's great. Some of the longer books that I've read this year, like Crescent City or A Court of Thorns and Roses, have longer chapters. Those are a little bit harder for me to get into. I have to be kind of in the right mind state to read a book that has longer chapters. But generally, if I feel myself getting unmotivated to read a book, I will read a book that has really short chapters, or even a book that is very short, like a novella or something like that, just to get that momentum back. I often think with ADHD, we're looking for that like dopamine, and oftentimes we think of that as like finishing the book. So if you find your motivation is waning, grab a book with short chapters, grab a book that is really short, and get that win under your belt to motivate you to get those longer series that you really want to dive into. My third tip for reading with ADHD is to grab a book that thrills you. Now, this could be a thriller. Like I said, Frida McFadden was one of my top authors this year. And what I love about her is they're short chapters. Every single chapter ends on a cliffhanger almost. And she jumps you right into the Is that the garage door? So those are my tips to make reading more magical, to make reading a habit, to actually read. Here are the books that I could not put down this year. We're gonna start in the thriller category, which was one of my top categories this year. I read so many thrillers, like so many. I read almost every single book by Frida McFadden. I read almost every single book by Taylor Adams. I just really have loved thrillers. This was very hard to narrow down, by the way, but my number 3 thriller that I loved was First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This was such an interesting book. It's so funny because I read so many thrillers this year that I'm like, what was that one about? But I just found this story to be so complex and interesting and just really was unlike any other thriller that I had read. I genuinely have to look up what it was about because I cannot remember. This one was about a woman who has a hidden identity. She has it hidden from everyone in her life, including her boyfriend. She has like this beautiful house with the white picket fence, like this dream life, but it actually is completely fake. And so she has to untangle some mysteries as her job starts to spiral out of control. Fascinating. Fascinating. My next favorite book in the thriller category is One by One by Frida McFadden. This was the first book I read by her and it totally jump-started my love of thrillers. This is about a group of friends who go on a like trip in the woods. They go to a cabin, they get lost in the woods, and some awful things start happening to them and they don't know why. And it's just a really cool book that I really did not see the ending coming. And I think it's a lot of times people ask me what Frida McFadden book they should start with. I always recommend that one. She has a ton of great books. Like, honestly, I could do like a top 10 favorite list of just Frida books. But that one is always the one that I come back to because it really took me by surprise in so many different ways. I love the pacing of it, that fast paced kind of like popcorn thriller. Like, I can't get enough of it. I can't put it down. I literally picked this book up. I remember I was going to Florida and I was in the airport. I started reading it right before my plane boarded and I could not put it down and I finished it when my plane landed and then started another Frida book right away. Like literally could not stop. And I thought I got motion sickness when I read on planes prior to that moment, but I was so invested in this book, I couldn't put it down. So One by One, great one. My number 1 thriller, and this very much was a late contender. I think I finished it on like New Year's Eve. And so this might be recency bias, I don't know, but I can't stop thinking about this. I cannot stop thinking about it. It's called Hairpin Bridge by Taylor Adams. I read almost all of Taylor Adams' books after this. I read No Exit and The Last Word prior to this, and this one just slapped me in the face. There were so many times where I was reading this and my adrenaline was just out of control. This was not a relaxing book to read. This is a very dark thriller. I will just let you know that. So if you're not into that, skip this one. But I was on literally the edge of my seat. This was one of those books that it kept me up at night. Like I could not stop reading it. My adrenaline was so high that I started reading it while walking on my treadmill because I had to metabolize that energy somehow. And every single chapter I was like, wait, what the hell? There was a new twist. Did not see the ending coming. It was just everything I want in a thriller. I will also leave my Amazon storefront down below if you want to check out any of these books or any more that I recommend. I have them linked for you. Okay, if you're not into thrillers but you're into mysteries, I've got 3 recommendations for you. The first is 20 Years Later by Charlie Donlea? I don't know. This was a very cool mystery. It was about essentially in 2001, like right as the 9/11 attacks happened, this woman was getting charged with murder of her lover, and she ends up disappearing, presumed dead in 9/11. And so 20 years later, this journalist is basically like picks up this story where they're able to identify some of the people who have passed in 9/11 through old DNA samples and whatever. So this journalist goes out there and ends up uncovering this story, and then ends up uncovering that there was this murder investigation. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's lots of twists and turns along the way. And it was just a very cool story that was flipping back and forth between different perspectives and different timelines. And I always find those really keep my attention. So I loved that one. The next is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This was more like a mystery thriller kind of, but I cheated and I put it on my top 3 mysteries list because my thrillers list was full. This was one of the best mysteries that I read this year because I truly did not know what was going to happen. I did not know what was happening through most of the book. I will tell you, there is a dog in the book. The dog is totally fine, thriving even. So if you get upset by animals getting hurt, you'll be okay to read this one. Okay, I was a little worried. In the middle there, but the dog is fine. It's about an unhappy couple that takes a vacation in this like weird house, and some strange things start to happen. How am I at describing books that I read almost a year ago? Good? Great. And then my favorite mystery that I read this year is actually a young adult romance. It's called These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. And I loved both books in this series. So there's another one called This Coven Doesn't Break. It's the second one. But this is a very, very cool story if you're into like witchy mysteries with a little bit of LGBTQIA romance. It was just really cool. It's about this witch that is, I think she's in high school. She's really like coming into her own. And also there's like an element of mystery because like someone's coming after her because she's supposed to hide that she's a witch. And it was just a really great story, really easy read, really fun, really light, read that I think is just great. If you're into mysteries, you're into witches, you'll like this one. Okay, my next 2 genres are also kind of linked, romance and romantasy. So for romance, my number 3 book was New Witch on the Block by Louisa West. I read a couple of books in this series and it was just really sweet. It's about a witch in a small town romance with a witch. It's very cute. It's very sweet. It's not like one of those witchy books where like the witchiness is all up in your face and everyone's like, burn her. It was just a really sweet story. There were moments where I laughed out loud. There was moments where I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And I just felt really immersed in the characters and immersed in the world. There's like 9 books in this series. I think I read the first 3 maybe. And then one of them was like holiday themed. And I read these back in April and I was like, I'll wait until Christmas to read this one. And then I didn't. So maybe I'll pick the rest up later. But the first ones that I did read were great. The second romance book, my second favorite, is going to be a hit or miss for you. It is called Lights Out by Nevessa Allen, and this is like a dark romance. Whenever I describe the plot of this, like I can just picture your face. So essentially, This girl is lusting after a guy who makes TikTok thirst traps in a mask. And he begins to consensually stalk her. She's into it. Breaks into her house. And he's like a golden retriever. He's like the sweetest man alive, but also he's stalking her. It's like very strange, but she's into it. Anyways, they accidentally kill a guy. And so they have to work through that while they fall in love. And it's very cute. It's very spicy. So if you don't like spicy romances, skip this one. If you don't like dark romances, skip this one. But I just found it to be like really fun and weird and quirky. And then my number one romance is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I've really fallen in love with Emily Henry books. They're just really easy, light rom-com reads. This one was just really cute. It was about essentially this like couple broke up, they were engaged, and then he starts going out with his like childhood friend or best friend or whatever. And so she and her boyfriend break up. And so the ex-fiance and the ex-boyfriend become roommates and fall in love. It's very cute. The banter's great. Highly recommend. And then for my romantasy, I have four. I have a top four. Okay, so tied for third place is the Dark Olympus series by Katie Roberts. I read the first three. The first one is called Neon Gods. The third one was my favorite so far. The third one, the best way I can describe it is if Gale and Peeta from the Hunger Games were also banging each other in addition to Katniss. That's that book. But the series is basically like, you know, I think the first one is like a Hades and Persephone retelling. They're very spicy. They're very fun. They're very fast reads, short reads. They're good ones. They're great. If you're into that, highly recommend. I tied that one with the Crescent City books by Sarah J. Maas, specifically House of Earth and Blood, which is the first one. That was one of my favorite books that I read all year. The reason it's not higher up is because the rest of the series kind of let me down. I did read them all, but the first one was just so good. It was a romantasy, but it's also a whodunit, like murder mystery. So it's the perfect, like if I put a Venn diagram of like mystery thriller and like romance romantasy, that one's right in the center. So I really, really love that one. My second favorite romantasy is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. The third book, Onyx Storm, is coming out this month, so I'm very excited. I'm actually rereading this one. This is the first book that I read last year that I'm rereading. I'm listening to the I'm listening to the audiobook that is like with all the characters and whatever. It's so good. It's so good. But this is about a girl who kind of gets thrust into being a dragon rider and has to go through all of these trials and falls in love with, you know, her enemy, and there's dragons and it's fun. It's basically like Hunger Games, but with dragons and smut. You'll like it. Okay, Molly from the future here. I have officially finished listening to Fourth Wing and Iron Flame again and have finished Onyx Storm, and I'm here to tell you that I should have ranked that one higher because it hit me just as hard the second time, and it is my favorite series of all time. So if you haven't read that one, that's the one. And then my number one romantasy book is A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stasia Stark. Someone will let me know. This whole series was my favorite. I would not shut the fuck up about it after I read it. It's 4 books. They're on Kindle Unlimited, which is nice. That's where I read a lot of my books, by the way, is Kindle Unlimited or through the Libby app, which links with your library card. But this was just a really lovely, lovely story about fairies, and there's smut and there's war. The third book is probably my favorite. I'm gonna do a dramatic reaction of me reading the ending of the third book. Ready? What? Oh my God. Immediately download the 4th book. And I did not put that down. So that's how I feel about that series. The whole series is called Kingdom of Lies. The first one is A Court This Cruel and Lovely. The whole series is great from start to finish. I loved it. She's actually coming out with like a adjacent series this year. She's doing a 2-book series on like one of the characters we meet in the later books. So that's exciting. That's coming soon. I've already pre-ordered it. Anyways, those are my favorite books of the year. I would love to know what your favorite book that you read in 2024 is, especially if they fit in any of my favorite genres. And if you have any tips to make reading more fun, more witchy, or easier, I'd love to hear those too. And let me know if you want to see more like book reviews on this channel. Could be fun. Could be fun if we did like a monthly wrap up of books. I don't know. Let me know. I do read a lot. And subscribe if you're into this stuff. Bye!